Hopefully, this doesn't look at all familiar to you, but for many, it is all too familiar. They've dug themselves into a financial hole at the worst possible time, and as a result, bankruptcies among Americans age 65 and older are on the rise. What does that say about the broader financial challenges facing retirees today, and how can you protect yourself? Yes, you guessed it, it's time once again to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies in new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional style investing to your portfolio. Hello, I'm David Scranton. You know, for a growing number of baby boomers, traditional ideas about retirement are being turned upside down by a dismal new reality, and that is bankruptcy. It's an unfortunate trend, and as a result of the fact that an increasing number of Americans are entering retirement with a crippling amount of debt. Many turn to bankruptcy as a means of dealing with their debt without wiping out their retirement savings completely. But is that always the best way or the only option? Are there other things that you can do to dig out of a hole of debt before you have to consider bankruptcy? We'll talk about all that and more today with the help of our guests, author and financial coach Chris Hogan and financial advisor Sam McElroy. But first, let's look at the rise in bankruptcy among retirees and why it's happening. You know, older Americans have become increasingly likely to file for consumer bankruptcy, and the representation among those who declare bankruptcy has never been higher. Data from the Consumer Bankruptcy Project, a long-term study, shows that the rate of people age 65 or over filing for bankruptcy is 3 times what it was back in 1991. The project found that one of the most common reasons that older Americans cited for their decision to declare bankruptcy was a combination of too little income, too much debt, and the increasingly crippling costs of health care. In fact, yes, 3 out of 5 people surveyed said that unmanageable medical expenses played a role in their filing for bankruptcy. Not really surprising at all if you think about it. Now, as I pointed out many times on the show, healthcare costs rise at a higher and steeper rate than the general rate of inflation, basically doubling every 12 years or so. The impact can be devastating for those already saddled with debt. A study by the Kaiser Family Foundation, a nonprofit group, recently found that older Americans typically turn to Medicare to pay their medical bills, but gaps in coverage, high premiums, and other issues have forced many people to spend more of their own money on medical bills. In 2013, for example, the average Medicare beneficiary's out-of-pocket spending on health care already consumed 41% of the average Social Security check. That figure has only risen since then, as it is expected to continue rising in the future. Research data also suggests that the rise in bankruptcies among retirees actually correlates to the social shift away from government and employer-sponsored pension plans to American workers being made more responsible for saving and strategizing for their own retirement. This trend has been growing now for 30 to 40 years, of course. But in the past 18 years, it has meant the loss of a security blanket for many Americans at a time when the financial markets and the economy have undergone big changes and have experienced major crises. Many Americans who suffered significant financial losses when the stock market first plunged by nearly 50% from 2000 to 2002, and then by nearly 60% from 2007 to 2009, may actually never have fully recovered their nest eggs in time for retirement. And even if they did, the effects of inflation, combined with those rising healthcare costs, may have dramatically eroded their spending power. Making matters worse, many Americans came out of the financial crisis with heavy debt, and some of the money that would have otherwise gone to recouping their lost savings had to be defrayed to pay down loans. Remember, between 2002 and 2007, the average American could walk into just about any bank, get a loan for just about anything or for any amount. This led, of course, to overextension on mortgages, on car loans, and loans of virtually all types. When the Great Recession struck, many were forced to start making minimum payments on their loans. In other words, paying only the interest and beginning the process of, yes, digging themselves into a bigger hole of debt. That process has continued as they've tried to pay down debts while also trying to rebuild their lost savings. And in many cases, they've ended up incurring more debt due to a combination of factors. Now, in addition to inflation and rising medical costs, as we've already mentioned, many have also had to contend with stagnant wages and other financial obligations, things like aging parents and grown children. The bottom line is that bankruptcy is typically a last resort for dealing with unmanageable debt, whether it was caused by medical expenses, credit cards, student loans, in most cases, a combination of these things. We'll talk more about that and how to determine whether your own debt may leave you in danger for your retirement goals. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. We'll also examine the question, what exactly does bankruptcy mean for a retiree or a near retiree? Are your 401ks and IRA accounts vulnerable to creditors in a bankruptcy settlement? And what other assets and sources of retirement income, such as Social Security, what about those? Again, we'll talk more about some of the specifics of bankruptcy at or near the retirement age a bit later in the show. But right now, let's welcome our good friend, Chris Hogan, back to the show. In addition to being an expert on mortgages and investing, Chris is a #1 national best-selling author of the book, Retire Inspired. It's not an age, it's a financial number. For more than a decade, Chris has been part of the team at Ramsey Solutions, spreading a message of hope as a financial coach and as a Ramsey personality. Mr. Hogan challenges and equips people to take control of their money and to reach their financial goals through his national TV appearances and his own show, The Chris Hogan Show. His latest book, Everyday Millionaires, How Ordinary People Built Extraordinary Wealth, and How You Can Too, is set to publish on January 7th, 2019. Chris, it's my pleasure to have you back on the show.
Well, thank you, my friend. It's good to be back with you.
So, first question, what motivated you to write another book? Tell us what this is about. Coming up soon,
Yeah.
January 7th.
Yes, it is. And I tell you, it was really digging in and understanding this whole concept of building wealth. I think I started to believe some of the myths that are out there. You know, that you had to be born into money before you could build wealth, or you had to make this massive income, right? And I got curious and I wanted to reach out and talk to some people out there in America that had done it. And the next thing you know, I'm reaching out and end up talking to over 10,000 millionaires out there. And during that research project, I really got some truths, and I thought people need to know this. I want to share this information, as well as the stories about how people built their wealth. So this book project is a culmination of both of those, getting to the truth with the research, finding out the stories, and also giving people some wisdom.
Now, of course, our show today is about bankruptcy and debt control, and I want to focus our conversations more on the positive side of debt control, not so much on negatives of bankruptcy, but just to give some people hope in case they are in a really bad situation. I'm curious, of those people that you've spoken to or you've interviewed or whom you've investigated, you know, how many of those people that are millionaires that are self-made actually made some bad mistakes, went through a bankruptcy before they finally figured out their version of the secret formula for wealth?
Yeah. Well, I think when you really look at things, you understand we've all made financial mistakes. And a lot of those millionaires had made mistakes at some point in their life. Some of them had even filed for bankruptcy.
Sure.
But what I love is that they didn't allow that bad decision or that tough decision at that point in their life to define them. They actually got some knowledge and began to do some things the right way to be able to have that result.
It's like the famous story of Colonel Sanders, right? Gets his first
That's
Social
right.
Security check, decides he can't live this way. Next thing you know, whips out the old family recipe, and here we are. We have Kentucky Fried Chicken all over the world these days. So tell me, what can you tell our viewers about the things that are common traits of these individuals that have become financially successful?
Right. Well, the people that we studied, again, over the 10,000 millionaires that we looked at, they all had some character traits. They were very intentional about what they do. They were goal-oriented. They started to write some things down and really be aware of what they're doing to chase it. They also used an investment professional. They didn't go at it alone.
Right.
They got a professional in their life. And it's just like with us, with our car repairs or home repairs. We don't want to deal with somebody and hope it gets done right. We want to deal with someone that knows what they're doing. And so these are the kinds of things that we uncovered. And it was just exciting to see. And the stories are amazing. I'm talking about people that came from welfare, people that did end up filing bankruptcy. People that were living in a car, but they turned things around because they believed in what they could do.
So what do you think logistically they did to change their thinking? They're obviously going down a negative path with their thinking for a while, and they had to change that. What do you think most of them did? Can we create a common element for people to follow, maybe a guideline, if you will? If their mindset isn't so healthy right now, what they can do to make that transition, as a lot of these other folks did.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think for a lot of them, they looked around and realized they wanted things better for themselves. They wanted things better for their kids or their grandkids one day. And so I think they ultimately got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I
Sure.
think when we hit that point, that's where we make a decision that better is available. We just need to get the right kinds of information and start to change our habits. David, I think when we make decisions about our habits, we can actually impact our future.
So it's kind of like, they say anybody, whether it's an alcoholic, they have to hit bottom. So I guess if you're a spendaholic or a debtaholic, you got to hit bottom too. That actually makes sense. Chris, we need to take a commercial break. Stay with us. We'll be right back for our next block. And I want to talk to you more about the psychology of people and what separates someone who can keep debt under control versus what separates someone from letting it get out of control. You stay with us too. We'll be right back here with many more words of wisdom from our good friend Chris Hogan on the income generation.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model. Call now for your free income kit from the Retirement Income Store, where baby boomers go for income.
Read David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, Return on Principle, 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Discover practical solutions to the financial challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. Learn the truth about Wall Street, the financial media, and the secrets they try to hide from everyday investors. This isn't just another book about investing. Working Americans who have lived through 2 major stock market crashes and the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression in the past 16 years don't need another book about investing. David Scranton's approach to financial planning is a holistic system designed for maximum protection, strategic growth, and reliable income regardless of market conditions. Stop planning for retirement with your fingers crossed. Read Return on Principle, 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Available now.
If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation. Again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. As regular viewers may recall, we actually devoted an entire show earlier this year to the topic of debt and its potential impact on retirement. Now, while debt doesn't always lead to a bankruptcy, of course, it can severely limit and even completely sabotage your ability to achieve your retirement goals. That is, if it's not sufficiently managed. A growing number of older Americans are learning this the hard way, and there are a number of reasons for it happening. A recent survey by the mortgage lender, American Financing, found that 44% of Americans between ages 60 and 70 are still paying off their homes when they retire. The survey also found that 32% predict that they'll be paying their mortgage for at least 8 more years. And as many as 17% said that they may never be able to pay off their mortgage. The results of this survey closely mirror findings from an October 2017 Fannie Mae report, which actually showed that baby boomers demonstrate a greater likelihood of carrying mortgage debt into retirement than previous generations. Having a mortgage in retirement now isn't necessarily a bad thing, and can have some strategic financial advantages. The problem occurs, though, when it's combined with other debts, And when that's carried into retirement, and it becomes increasingly unmanageable for all the reasons we've already discussed: inflation, healthcare costs, obligation to adult children, obligations to parents, and the list goes on and on and on. And that's exactly the problem facing many older Americans. And it's the reason bankruptcies among baby boomers are on the rise. Instead of paying off most debt before retirement, many older Americans are carrying debt into their senior years. According to another recent study in 1992, just over half of U.S. homes in which the head of house was aged 55 or older carried a high debt-to-income ratio. By 2013, that number had grown to 65%, and it continues to rise. Now, not only are more households carrying more debt, but the level of debt has dramatically increased as well. Again, the era of loose lending and cheap money in the early 2000s is certainly in large part to blame. Many Americans overborrowed during that time and ended up unable to pay down their debt after the financial crisis hit. Now, another major culprit is, you guessed it, credit cards. According to the latest studies, 42% of Americans aged 65 to 74 have credit card debt. We don't mean the kind you pay off every month. We mean credit card debt that rolls from one month to the other. Now, this is slightly more than those in the age 55 to 64 group. However, just over a quarter of people, over 25% age 75 or older, have credit card debt. Now, carrying a large amount of credit card debt into retirement can be especially troublesome, in part because the interest rates on credit cards typically outpace most investment returns. The average credit card interest rate today is over 16%. That's compared with 4 to 6% average rates of return most retirees can reasonably get from their investments, depending on their asset allocation and their level of risk. Now, yet another major cause of unmanageable debt after retirement today is, believe it or not, student loans. According to a 2017 report by the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, the number of people aged 60 and over with student loans quadrupled from 700,000 in 2005 to 2.8 million in 2015. And the average debt owed by older borrowers also nearly doubled during that time, going from 12,000 to almost 24,000. Now, while many of these individuals borrowed or co-signed these loans for these private student loans, in essence, on behalf of their children and grandchildren, others took on debt to finance their own education or to help a spouse earn a degree later in life. A growing number of older Americans in this situation have even had a portion of their Social Security benefits seized for non-payment of federal student loans, which, yes, can happen even after one is filed for bankruptcy. So what else is possible and not possible after you've gone through a bankruptcy process? And is it really the only or the best option for dealing with unmanageable debt in or near retirement? We'll talk about that much more a bit in the show, but right now, let's welcome back our guest, Chris Hogan. Chris, thanks for sticking around.
Absolutely. Glad to be with you.
Now, I know you talked about the importance of having to get frustrated, having to get angry. I guess that requires just not burying your head in the sand, so to speak. I guess there's sometimes when anger can be a good tool. It can force you to hit bottom and do something about it. And then you said, go ahead and write down your goals. Make sure you have your goals spelled out. That's a great motivator. Any other final words of wisdom for somebody in terms of changing their mindset when it comes to debt?
I think you have to be honest with yourself. You've got to understand, how do you spend? I've done some research, and I meet people that love to celebrate by spending. Then I know other people, if they're sad, they like to medicate by spending. Mm-hmm. And so what type of spender are you? I think that awareness allows you to be able to put some controls in place. And so what I did, I coached a lady years ago. She was a celebratory spender. When anything good happened, she wanted to go out and spend. And I said, you know what? That's okay. How about we put this first step in place? Instead of you spending $200 to celebrate, why don't we spend 20? And put some parameters around it. And lo and behold, that was something that actually worked for her. Mm-hmm. And so I think know yourself so you can put some guidelines in place to be able to help yourself.
Yeah, it seems like the harder one is the person who spends when they feel bad. It's almost like any kind of obsessive compulsive issue where, okay, you feel bad, so you overeat, and then you feel worse, so then you eat even more. Or you drink, and then you feel worse, so then you drink even more. Spending is really just another drug for those people.
It really is. I mean, money is another habit. We all have our habits, and I think it's important for us to be aware of it, and then also, for young people out there to be able to establish new habits. But even if you're older, I want you to hear me. You can begin new habits. It just takes awareness and effort to put those in place.
Yeah, anyone can change at any age, absolutely. So
Yes.
let's change the subject a little bit. One of the things that people can do sometimes if they have a lot of debt in retirement is they can downsize their home. Talk to us about that. How can one determine when they should downsize their home, if they should, and if so, what do you recommend in that realm?
Yeah. Well, if you are in retirement and you're looking at how can I cut some expenses? How do I make living a little bit cheaper?
Sure.
Downsizing a home is definitely an option. When you look around, if there's just a couple of you or two of you in a home and you've got, 3,000 or more square feet, do you really need that? And I think that's a personal preference for some people, but also the reality. Expenses are bigger for bigger homes. And so really looking at it, and I tell people this, think of options, right? Everybody loves options. Nobody likes mandates. So think of options of what you could do if you were to downsize the home. How much equity do you have that would be coming to you? And where could you live and what would those expenses look like? I think it's a lot easier for us to embrace change when we're identifying options and brainstorming about what could be.
Sure. I actually know somebody who decided to downsize their home, but they're worried about the family. When the family comes over, we need a place to stay for the family. So the compromise was that they could downsize their home, and with the equity they have left, they could take a small part of it. They actually bought a mobile home they could park in the driveway of their new home. Family could come over, stay in the mobile home, and they had plenty of money left over to pay off debts. So I think if you get creative, you can
Yes.
do a lot, can you not?
I love that idea. I had a client that didn't go to that realm, but they actually, once they downsized, they put a set dollar amount aside each month for hotel rooms when family would come visit. It gave family an opportunity to come, all be
Sure.
together, but even they had their own separate space later. So there are many ways, you don't want to spend and pay for a house 364 days out of the year for the one day that family comes to visit.
That's right. That's right. So think about what you're trying to accomplish and think outside the box. Make debt your number one priority, paying it down, and don't look back. Chris, stay with us. We'll be back in a minute, and you stay with us too. We'll be back with more on the Income Generation. Chris Hogan.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model. Call now for your free income kit from the Retirement Income Store, where baby boomers go for income.
Read David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Discover practical solutions to the financial challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. David Scranton's approach to financial planning is a holistic system designed for maximum protection, strategic growth, and reliable income regardless of market conditions. Available now.
So how could bankruptcy impact your retirement savings and your overall financial picture later in life? Does bankruptcy really make sense for a retiree? Are there other options? Here are some of the most important facts regarding bankruptcy in or near retirement. Number one, odds are your retirement accounts will not be directly affected by your bankruptcy. If you have money in a 401k, 403b, 457 deferred comp plan, a KEO, or any other defined benefit or profit-sharing pension plan, it cannot be seized by creditors if you file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, no matter what the amount is. What if you file Chapter 13, where the goal is to restructure and reduce your debt, as opposed to having it completely forgiven? Well, that's also good news because the money in your retirement accounts, again, will not be factored in to the amount that you're obligated to pay back. Similarly, if you've already rolled your savings into an IRA, Roth IRA, SEP IRA, or Simple IRA, as most do once they retire, that money is also generally exempt from creditors, but only up to a certain limit, and the laws on this can vary from state to state. What about Social Security? Well, technically Social Security and disability income are protected under federal law from seizure by creditors. This protection also extends into bankruptcy. Money that can be traced to Social Security is either exempt in a Chapter 7 filing, or the judge rules that it never becomes the property of the bankruptcy estate. The exception here applies to money owed to the federal government. Go figure. The government can withhold some part of your Social Security payments to satisfy debt on taxes, on family support, or as we already mentioned, yes, on federal student loans. What about medical bills, the source of so much financial distress for so many people? Well, if you qualify for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, your outstanding medical and health care bills are counted among the types of debt that may be discharged, along with credit card debt, personal loans, utility bills, and some attorney's fees. On the flip side, however, types of debt that are not dischargeable in bankruptcy include your mortgage and your car payments. That, of course, assumes that you want to keep those assets through the bankruptcy, as well as things like tax liens and other tax bills, child support, and again, student loans. So bottom line is this: is bankruptcy ever a good idea for older Americans? Well, as I said frequently on this show, there's no one-size-fits-all solution in the financial world in virtually any area. And depending upon your situation, there may be other options, though, that you can pursue without resorting necessarily to bankruptcy. For example, if your main concern is that creditors are harassing you, there are state and federal debt collection laws you can take advantage of to get them to stop. At the same time, you might take steps to negotiate with your creditors to extend your payment schedules and possibly even settle your debts for less than you owe. If you're not comfortable negotiating with creditors on your own, you might enlist the services of a nonprofit credit or debt counseling agency. In some cases, negotiating directly with creditors can end up working, like a Chapter 13 bankruptcy filing, kind of sort of, but without the legal fees and the negative impact of a bankruptcy on your credit rating. Just beware of debt management and credit counseling scammers if you take this course. There are plenty of them out there, so do your research before signing up for any plan. And finally, another viable option for some people struggling with debt or near retirement is really to do nothing, to take no action at all. As we already discussed, many of your most important retirement assets are already protected from creditors, and except in unusual situations such as refusal or inability to pay federal loans or taxes, you cannot be put in jail for debt. There's no such thing as debtor's jail any longer. And if you've been deemed judgment proof, then guess what? You can't be sued either. Now, make no mistake, I'm not making a blanket recommendation of this strategy or any of these strategies for anyone watching the show. Obviously, this strategy, like all the others, has their own variety of downsides. Again, the point is every situation is different, and your best recourse always is to devise your financial strategy with the help of a qualified professional advisor, ideally one who understands retirement income and can help you with these types of things. But right now, let's welcome back one last time our friend Chris Hogan. Chris, now let's say that somebody already has a reasonably conservative home and there really are not any downsizing opportunities, but they want to get that home paid off before retirement. What advice do you have for those income generation members who have that as kind of a burning goal, which is a good goal, by the way?
It is a great goal. I mean, paying off the home, imagine how much money that frees up for you each and every month. So I think with anything, when you get serious about it, I want you to consider the benefits. Meaning, what would it look like? How would it feel if you were to pay off that house? What could you do with that money? See, I think it's good for us to start there and then start to acknowledge, okay, what are we willing to do? I think everything starts at the budget. I think you being aware of how much you're spending and what's it take for you to run your household on, but then begin to tighten up some of those things. For example, maybe you cut back eating out 5 nights a week down to 2 and redirect the other 3 nights worth of eating out toward paying extra on your home. So I think the budget is a great area to start. But I'm telling you something, I've had people take on extra jobs to attack the mortgage so they could free up that payment a lot sooner.
And Chris, I love what you said. You said, write it down and think about how it would feel to be debt-free. That's what motivates people. If you just write down on a piece of paper, I want to be debt-free, that doesn't really motivate anybody. Those are just a bunch of letters on a piece of paper written with a pen or pencil. But if you really take time to write out in sensory-specific fashion what it's going to feel like to be debt-free and what you'll be able to do for your family, that's what really motivates people to do this kind of stuff.
Well, it really does. It changes the game. I mean,
Yeah.
David, you hit on the psychology of a lot of things. And I think this money area, it's also one of those. But we tend to play up the negative so much, we forget that the positive can be very powerful. You know, to really think about that, what could you do without that payment leaving you? How much could you save toward retirement? How much more giving could you do? And when
Right.
people think about that, I think it can really motivate them.
Okay, so now I've got my plan to get my mortgage paid off in time. Just calculated how much extra I need to put down. I'm ready to go. Now, how do we supercharge our retirement plan beyond that? Supercharge is the word that you like to use, so tell us why you use that word and what you like to see people doing.
Well, for me, retirement's not an age, it's a financial number. And so I've got a list of the things that I want to be able to do. I want to be able to do some mission trips. I want to give to charities. I want to be able to prepare and have things in place for my grandkids one day. So I'm hyper motivated. When you're motivated, you start to look and you make better decisions. You want to understand, how do I grow my money? Well, the best way to grow money is with time and compound interest. So investing it in the right things and understanding my risk tolerance and my timing, utilizing Roth IRAs if you have those available to you based on your income bracket, or if you're a higher earner, being able to understand about backdoor Roth IRAs, backdoor IRAs that you can set up. So getting professionals around you so you can gain more knowledge, so you can do better at what you're already doing, but also consider doing some new things to help you fast forward.
And you know, if you have your goals, you know why you're doing it. Investing doesn't have to be a chore. It can actually be fun. You can get excited by putting the money away. So with that thought, in the 20 seconds we have left in this block, what swing thought do you want to leave our income generation viewers with?
Well, I want to encourage them to dream big. You know, I know you're working hard and I know you're focused, but I want you to figure out, what can you do to fast forward? What can you tighten up to be able to speed up to be able to get to your dreams?
Excellent. And where can they find your book?
They can find this on pre-sale. So right now you can go to chrishogan360.com, and
Okay.
$20, you're going to get $50 of free items. So it's a great opportunity. Go to my website. You can learn more.
I love it. Chris, thanks so much for being with us again. I really appreciate it. My pleasure as usual.
Well, thank you, my friend. I look forward to coming back.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more here on The Income Generation.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model. Call now for your free income kit from the Retirement Income Store, where baby boomers go for income.
Read David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, Return on Principle: 7 Core Values to Help Protect Your Money in Good Times and Bad. Discover practical solutions to the financial challenges facing today's generation of retirees and near retirees. David Scranton's approach to financial planning is a holistic system designed for maximum protection, strategic growth, and reliable income regardless of market conditions. Available now.
As I said before, crippling debt doesn't always end up in bankruptcy. But the increasing number of Americans age 65 and over filing for bankruptcy makes it clear to me, at least, that more and more Americans are struggling with debt right before and right after retirement. With that in mind, let's review a few of the steps that you can take right now to get a better handle on your debt if you feel that you're carrying too much. The first one is simple, at least in concept. Make paying down debt a top priority, a top financial goal. In particular, focus on paying off any high-interest credit cards before further funding your retirement accounts, unless, of course, it's a 401k where your employer is matching. Number 2, if you don't have a budget, make one and stick to it. Set tight dollar amounts on things like entertainment, food, clothing, gifts. Those are the kinds of things that can cause credit card debt to balloon out of control. And by restricting what you spend on them, odds are you'll find that you actually have enough money to pay down your existing debts. Next, we've already mentioned the financial burdens caused by being in the sandwich generation. Maybe you can't make the decision to limit financial support for an aging parent, but you can, and I believe should, make that decision when it comes to adult children. If your grown children really need financial help, they should be the ones to take on the debt, not you. Simply put, they have more time to pay it down than you do. Now, another step that can help with debt is downsizing. Most retirees do this anyway, but it should be done in such a way that you can end up with significant savings or windfall that can help you pay down, or yes, actually pay off these debts. And this tip may sound obvious, but be especially careful about taking on any new debt. That includes not just credit cards, but also agreeing to co-sign any type of loan. As you probably know, another common strategy for dealing with financial troubles in or after retirement is this concept of a reverse mortgage. And in very specific situations, yes, it can be a viable option. But as I've explained on previous shows, in my experience, a reverse mortgage should only be considered as a very last resort. And again, regardless of your situation, I believe your odds of reducing your debt burden and avoiding bankruptcy to achieve your retirement goals are dramatically increased when you enlist the help of an advisor who specializes and who understands retirement and retirement income. Now it's time to welcome our next guest to the show, another repeater, Sam McElroy. Sam is a co-founder and partner of At Financial and At Financial Investments. In addition to his financial licenses, Sam holds a doctorate in psychology and is a recipient of several humanitarian achievement awards. He's a highly sought-after speaker who appears regularly on financial news networks like CNBC. He's also a frequent guest on nationally syndicated radio programs such as After the Closing Bell, Retirement Matters with Buck Blanton, and Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman. Sam, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
So I asked you to be on the show today, and you've been on so many times because, in large part, because you do have a doctorate in psychology. And of course, I had the pleasure of being your guest in Chicago back in June, and of which you were a wonderful host, by the way. Thank you once again. And the pleasure of seeing you in action in your office with your clients. And I find that being a psychologist really helped you in terms of understanding people better than most financial advisors who are very left-brained. And understanding people in terms of why they do certain things and human behavior. So tell me, what have you found when you find people that come in that are prone to a lot of debt? And not only people who had bad medical situations and kind of got saddled with debt unexpectedly, but people who developed their own debt through bad habits, versus those who are virtually debt-free approaching retirement. What's the difference psychologically from this person here to that person there?
There's a couple of different ways to actually start to analyze this or to think through it. Most of us like to believe that we make sane, rational, logical financial decisions. We want to think that we're so analytical and that everything is black and white. There's a clear answer. But what we find is that it's not true. In fact, the same psychological processes that govern how we make decisions and relationships and career choices and so on and so forth are the same subconscious processes that basically impact the way that we manage and relate to money also. So you can see a lot in terms of how people just relate to debt, how they relate to finance, and that really tells a large part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it true that, we only have about 20 seconds left in this block, but isn't it true that for the most part, we all make decisions emotionally and then we try to justify them rationally? Isn't that really how it works?
I think that's absolutely true. And to kind of, piggyback on that, I think it's true also that a lot of us are either going to be more motivated by trying to avoid a mistake or motivated by trying to move towards a goal. And I think that has a lot to do with who has debt versus who doesn't have debt as well.
Have the carrot and the stick. So unfortunately, we have a longer segment coming up. Fortunately, the introduction you sent us is so lengthy it took up almost all of this block, so I apologize. I'm just kidding. You stay with us. We'll be right back with more from Sam McElroy right here on The Income Generation. And it's time to welcome back Sam McElroy. Now, I teased Sam at the end of the last block by saying the script, the introduction he sent us was lengthy. The real truth, though, is our script writers with all of his accolades, actually had to pare down his introduction, and what you heard was the pared down version. So Sam, you just heard Chris Hogan from the Dave Ramsey Group on, and he deals with debt reduction every day working with people. I know for you, it's not as big of an issue because a lot of people come to you with some assets and you help them grow and protect their assets as an investment advisor. But even then, you come across enough people, I'm sure, that have issues with debt. So, you know, what do you think of the characteristics that follow people that perhaps are debt-ridden, debt-laden, versus those that have been able to keep debt under control for most of their lives?
Yeah. I think that, part of it comes down to certain characteristics in terms of what motivates people and what drives people. And I think part of it also just comes down to knowledge or lack thereof as well. So for example, if you're talking about somebody who's more likely to have debt, I find that it's people that are typically more motivated towards moving towards something, meaning that there's situations where they see something, whether it's a larger house, a bigger boat, better car, whatever it might be, and it's attractive enough that it seems worth going into debt out over it, and they feel like they can manage the debt and they don't want to deny themselves, so to speak, and so they're willing to go ahead and take that step. You can compare that type of mannerism or characteristic to somebody who has been raised or thought their whole life that they just had to save, and they see debt as really almost being evil in a sense, and they're going to do whatever they can to make sure they never go into debt. I think people kind of tend to fall somewhere within that continuum, and to a large degree, that starts to really decide who you're going to see that has a lot of debt going into retirement versus somebody that really has no debt, maybe not even a mortgage going into retirement.
So if someone's spending because they're moving toward things, so they've got to have the newest television, they've got to have the newest car, they've got to have things like that, then I guess the key is to replace that goal that they're moving toward with the excitement of moving toward retirement goals and moving toward the feeling of being financially self-sufficient, financially independent. That's kind of sort of the psychological game people need to play in order to make that transition, correct?
I think that's absolutely true. One of the biggest obstacles we as financial advisors always have to overcome is so many financial goals are intangible and kind of long terms from a planning standpoint. And that's constantly bumping up against day-to-day decisions of things that can give you instant gratification. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways to try to overcome that is, number one, to try to clearly define financial goals so that you have something that you can visualize, something that can become tangible, that you can monitor progress to, but also trying to take financial goals and really break it up into smaller goals so that you can have more successive wins, so to speak, also. But it definitely has to be replaced, otherwise it's going to be tough. Now, the other side of the equation is there's a lot of people that go into retirement debt simply because they just are poor money managers, in which case it's not so much a behavioral characteristic as it is they just learn the skill set.
Working with somebody like yourself. We're out of time. Thank you so much, Sam. We appreciate you being here. You stay with us. We'll be back here on The Income Generation. I'd like to thank both of our guests for joining us for another episode of The Income Generation. Of course, I'd like to thank you, our new and returning viewers. The rise in the number of older Americans filing for bankruptcy is certainly an unfortunate circumstance. But in the light of the issues we've discussed today, it's also understandable. As I often point out, the current generation of retirees and near retirees has a host of financial challenges to contend with that previous generations simply didn't. This starts with the fact that the responsibility of saving, investing, and planning for your retirement is entirely on your shoulders. Many of our parents and grandparents had pension plans they can count on. But these types of things are rare right now. Also, we're living longer, which is great news, except that we must now prepare for longer retirements, often up to 30 years or longer. Advancement in medicine and healthcare also means that many of us are caring for aging parents, a challenge that was less common in previous generations. And those medical advancements have come at a cost that continues to rise faster than ever before, making it another major challenge for our generation. To all of these, you can add a host of social and economic changes in the last 30 years, the rise in divorces, a less stable job market, an increasing number of grown children who are financially dependent on their parents, and the list goes on and on and on. And in the last 18 years, it's all been made even more challenging by the collapse of the housing market, 2 major stock market crashes, and the most devastating economic downturn in our country since the Great Depression. We all want to believe that things have gotten better in the last few years, and in some ways, they have. But here's the reality. We're still living in an unprecedented age of economic uncertainty, and many Americans are still struggling with the impact of the financial crisis as they approach retirement. They're struggling to dig out of debt holes that they had fallen into, to recoup lost savings and ensure that they'll have the income they need to achieve their retirement goals. For some, bankruptcy ends up being the only viable option. Others manage with different strategies. Regardless of your situation, please, please, please remember that your odds of dealing with it are dramatically increased with the help of a financial professional, someone who specializes in retirement income and with handling the unique challenges of those who are part of the income generation. Thanks for watching. If you're close to retirement and you really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, yes, it's absolutely essential that you stay informed and up to date. And right here is where you can do it on the income generation. I'm David Scranton. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.